Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Bob Johnson Auto Group, proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson. Believing an informed public makes for a stronger community. BobJohnsonAutoGroup.com.
From WXXI News, I'm Matt DeTurk, Artistic Director of the Little Theater, filling in today for Evan Dawson, and this is Connections. While LGBTQ plus arts and culture have received more mainstream visibility in recent years, the rapidly changing political climate has been showing a lack of support and often outright aggression towards individuals in these communities. Here in Rochester, Image Out is preparing to present its annual First Cut Spring Film Festival from April 24th to 29th, and like any arts organization at the moment, but specifically an LGBTQ plus one, there are lots of discussions about programming and mission in response to the current cultural landscape. How do we showcase films and art in this time? What sort of themes should we be focusing on? And what do people need to know in terms of balancing both an education for our culture and also some entertainment? Joining me today are Michelle Thornton, board chair for Image Out. Thanks for being here.
Hello, Matt. It's good to be here.
Rick Porlier, programming co-chair for Image Out.
Good afternoon, Matt. Thanks for having us.
And co-directors Jennifer Teixeira and Guy Mossman of the documentary film Speak on the phone. Hi, you two.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Hey,
Absolutely. I want to start out by kind of talking about the erasure of LGBTQ plus identities at the moment and how that has constantly been coming up both in the news, both in terms of like arts and in terms of just like stripping away of like terminology from websites, from arts organizations. And I think that like it's deeply important to still showcase those works by these communities today. And I think that's one of the great things about what Image Out is doing. Michelle, can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I think this is it's a really concerning development that we've seen really accelerated over the last few months. You can think about it from a variety of ways, whether that is literally the government directing medical organizations, removing data, anything that has the terminology around LGBTQ plus folks included in titles, and then beyond that, defunding those things. And I think this is where we start to see the impact in arts organizations. It's not so much that DC is directing the Kennedy Center to not have a gay men's choir perform or have a pride event there. But it's really coming down to the grassroots level as local theaters that have funding from the National Endowment for the Arts are being told what they can and they cannot screen or program as part of their events. And that kind of censorship, I think, is really, it feels very scary, very intentional, very directed. Image Out is fortunate that we don't currently have any federal funding, so we've been flying under the radar, but that gives us, I think, even more of a mandate to continue to create as much visibility as we can for these stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Rick, you've been like a volunteer programmer for years at this point. I won't say how many years.
Thank you, Matt.
Does this at the moment feel like a little bit of a different time, or does it feel like in this case like there's a different responsibility?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's always important to have these stories and these films and everything that we do around that, but especially nowadays, like Michelle was saying, with all the removal of all of the things that, it's more important now that we continue to do this, that we put it out there, we let people know that we are doing it so they can hopefully find some community from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think community ends up being such an important part of, as we're talking about like both marginalized communities who are being oppressed in that case and having community with each other. But I also think, Michelle, to your point about like locally as opposed to like on a national scale, I feel like so much information or so much feeling at the moment ends up coming down to like what can happen locally, what can happen grassroots, what can happen with you and your neighbors in that case to feel like we're building community and building not just a safe space, but also a space where we want to live, like in that case.
Yeah. Matt, I think about this a lot in terms of allies, right? I think people are looking for what they can do, what they can support, how they can make a difference within their immediate space that they have some ability to impact. So whether that is showing up for a protest or coming out to something like the Image Out Film Festival this weekend, I think it's a really good way to show allyship, to learn more about the communities that are feeling under attack right now, but also just to kind of come and connect and see yourself celebrated on the screen, and know that while social media or cable news might have people feeling disconnected or pushed off to the side or just not seen, that there are spaces here in Rochester where those stories are visible and where people can feel more affirmed and welcomed.
I think that, that's one of those great aspects about, film, is that it's a sense of seeing yourself, but it's also a sense of seeing like people around you. It's a sense of seeing your neighbors, or even, which we'll get into a little bit later, a sense about maybe communities that you're not as familiar with or don't know as much about. Jen and Guy, I want to speak for a second about your film Speak, which is screening on Saturday, April 26th at the Dryden Theater. And it is about the National Speech and Debate Association Nationals Tournament. The film follows 5 competitors as they struggle through the pressures of competition, with the high expectations from themselves and for each other, with topics ranging from anti-LGBTQ+ legislation, school shootings, and assisted suicide. The content is not only deeply personal to the students, but addresses some of today's most pressing societal issues. So as the co-directors, what I want to ask you was it difficult to make a film about young people in the pressures of today's society?
That's a great question.
You know what? That's a funny question, because actually it was, I think for both Guy and myself, it was so needed. I think we were both in places where we were kind of, just riddled with anxiety. I think that, there's been so much censorship, and there's been even within our own communities. And we really found this amazing opportunity in these kids to show like what we're capable of as a society, and critical thinking, and the things that have really been lost, or challenged right now. So we really looked at them as like, we're going to be okay.
What drew you in this case to make a film about this topic? Like, did you know someone involved in it, or how did you get involved in this topic?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess I can take this one. So I learned about this world in 2019, and when I discovered it, I just couldn't believe what I was hearing and seeing and beholding. These kids are so self-possessed, and they're just making all of us who were able to be there and witness what they're doing just see the world and contemplate the world and unpack the world in ways that I hadn't really done since college. And I just felt like, okay, these kids are also, they're doing it in a way that is very accessible. And these are kids who are from all walks of life. And this is also, just to draw a distinction, this is the world we call speech, where kids are writing 10-minute speeches. And some of the events are interpretive, and they're working with previous works. But the event we chose is called Oratory, and it's basically an original piece that is written from the ground up, and it's 10 minutes long, and they have a whole year to work and rework and craft and perform and rehearse this one piece. So it goes through different iterations, and we just felt like when we learned about not only this world but this event, we just thought it was fascinating to try and watch these kids peel back the layers of the onion and call us out on our blind spots.
Yeah, I've watched a couple films about spelling bees, and this kind of reminded me in theory of that, but I had never heard personally of this, so I'm super excited to try to catch this film. Jennifer, I had a question, which is, I think that great documentaries, like really do a great job of inspiring empathy, for other people, and spurring audiences to want to be allies, both to the people they see on screen, but also I hope that they take that like sense and broaden it beyond that, and again apply it to like people in their community or people like anywhere in the world. Can you speak a little bit about the importance of like being an ally and how you think that maybe like films help inspire that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I don't think we even consider making a film now without thinking about the Impact campaign, and that is making things accessible to others. I think that I don't know one documentarian who doesn't have an extreme sense of empathy or doesn't, for the most part, truly. I think we're more anthropologists than anything else, and so we want to. I always go back to this one quote that Esther has in the film, and she's like, it's basically in her speech and debate career, and being in a room with hundreds of students, she gets all these opinions from all these different walks of life, and even though she might not agree with what they're saying, she understands how they get there, and there's this deep-rooted idea of respect and understanding of one another that frankly we've just lost. And that's what we can do with documentary film and what we try to do so many times. We see in ways that we're different and in ways that we're similar, and it just brings us together in a way that's like, I love the medium, I love the genre, and so beyond the Impact campaigns, I think what you're able to see is these kids functioning in very similar ways, even though they might be from a different ethnicity, or they're queer, or all these things, and we can celebrate them in the same way for being phenomenal. So yes, a big resounding yes to your question. That's the hope, and that's what we're trying to accomplish in this.
And I think that that's one of the other aspects again, where if we talk about like what youth are consuming in that case, and we talk about like, between YouTube and TikTok and everything, and like what kind of media they're exposed to. And I think that a lot of people are talking now about how, young people won't come to the movies, or they won't go to theaters in that case, because of the fact that they're like, well, that's not really what they're looking for. But I think it's been interesting seeing that like Twitch streaming obviously can go on for hours in that case, and has various like long narratives. And then also, while I'm like kind of begrudging to mention the Minecraft movie at the moment, I feel like also has been so huge in terms of like youth and seeing stories and seeing themselves reflected. And I think that brings me to Michelle, that Speak is playing as part of Image Out's Next Generation series. Can you talk a little bit about like that series?
For sure. One thing I want to say is we were so excited when we found out about the film Speak, because we really liked the fact that there were so many different intersecting identities represented on the screen. And we felt that it was going to be an important kind of cornerstone of our youth outreach work, which is something that I think as a film festival we have struggled with, is getting younger people into the theater and excited about the kinds of stories that we're showing. So this was a huge opportunity for us. What the Next Generation series means is a couple of things. One, we do have a free tickets are available for anyone that is 25 and under for anything that is named as part of our Next Generation series. That is through a gracious donation from the Palma Foundation that we're able to support that work. But it's also a launching pad for something that we're doing new this year, which is a teen LGBTQ plus advisory board. And so we will be talking about that before the film on Saturday. And we've been really doing a ton of work to try and kind of get in front of local high schools, gay straight alliances, different kinds of, community youth organizations to make sure that folks understand that this it would be a fun and exciting film, not just to see, but also to be able to talk about with their friends and just kind of connect over.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of questions, if you have questions for any of our guests, you can call in 844-295-TALK. If you're in Rochester, the local number is 585-263-9994. You can email the show at connections@wxxi.org, or you can comment on YouTube. Guy, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the fact that you talked about entering into this world and dealing with a lot of young people in this case. Can you talk about, did you get a sense of like, obviously broadly lots of different people, but are you feeling specifically scared and isolated, or were these ones more nervous about this particular topic? Or I don't know, I feel like as a media, we're presenting constantly the sense that like, kids today aren't feeling upbeat about the future. Is that kind of also what you found?
Yeah, I was concerned about that and wanted to, at first, I think I kind of came to the project with that sort of preconception. And, we were casting very early on for students that were just wanted to, we're tearing it apart, we're willing to tear apart the administration. We're just, and what we discovered and found is that there's a lot more joy and love within this community. And even though it's very diverse, it's a space where they are finding ways and learning how to really listen deeply. And so in that process, they're feeling very connected. And yes, there is pain within that comes out. It's very therapeutic for many of them, and you'll see that in the film. But at the end of the day, they're not like, they're almost thinking bigger picture. They're not getting caught up in the weeds. Yes, debate will debate policy issues, but they're thinking about, I think, things that are deeper, almost more profound, and what it means, identity. Like as we were talking about this intersectionality of different identities, and what that means to live in a world of that kind of plurality. And these are teenagers, and they are coming into their own. So they are also thinking about identity, who they want to be, who they are, what are the things they want to stand for, and when they grow up, but it's an uplifting community. I don't know if you found that, Jen.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
It just had that. Both of us just, we just found it almost to be like, don't you all like want to just, be more critical of what is happening? And I think that they just are like, why? Let's talk about how we can
fix it. Yeah,
how we can fix it.
It's refreshing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Well, one of my most favorite anecdotes in first conversations with Esther, a guy sent me Esther's speech when she was a sophomore and she had won the national championship. And it was that moment where I was like, oh, I'm in. Yes, whatever we're going to do, let's do it. And one of my first conversations with her, which was just this complete aha moment, was I asked her how she identified politically. And she looked at me just so defeated, like, you're going to really ask me this? And she was like, you're not going to like my answer. I'm a Christian that believes in LGBTQ rights. It doesn't fit into the box. It doesn't fit into the box that you all want to put us in. And because we're fluid, we're fluid with gender, and we're fluid with, our beliefs. And it's so much bigger than that. And it was just this moment of like, wow, we have gotten into this, there's this two-party system and everything's just black and white, and it's not. And that's what's so incredible. And that's what I think Guy is trying to express when he says it's so much bigger than where we've been, our headspace has been for so long.
That's what
one of our
please.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please, Guy, go ahead.
No, one of our characters, Sam, who is who is from just outside Fargo in Moorhead, Minnesota, and his speech kind of goes to the heart of this in a way. He's like, we need to start, he's calling out both sort of political rhetoric from both sides of the spectrum. We need to stop thinking about moving forward by celebrating the past and trying to idealize the past as a place where we're safe or as a place where we're economically sound. We need to be thinking not in terms of nostalgia, but in terms of like looking forward to what we can be. So his speech really embodies that.
Yeah, I think that's really, an important part about, I love like thinking about like how to actually enact current change and how to actually like, not fall back and be like, oh, well, it used to be this way. And so that was great. Like, but constantly, And I think that that's one of the things that's so like fresh and exciting about film festivals in that case, again, is like getting a chance to experience, other films. Rick, I know that you have a huge passion for international film.
I do. I do. Yes. I love them. I think the fact that we're going on our 33rd annual fall festival kind of, talks about the impact of those stories over the course of time. Like the fact that, queer people have always been around and will always be around. The breadth of the history is just, and I fell in love with international films at a pretty young age, actually. But yeah, I think the fact that we continue to have this year after year, new stories, the way stories are told, I think that's important. It's an important identifier for people looking for, like I say, community or other people who, hey, these folks might be similar to me. Like, so maybe I'll check it out.
Yeah, and I think that's again to your point. Like, I think queer and trans stories have existed, whether we have documentation of them, not just since the dawn of time, but worldwide in that case. Like, it's literally every culture, everywhere. Do you have anything like a particular favorite of yours from like the international films of this year's lineup?
Of this year? Yes, there actually is. For this festival, there's a film called Sauna. It's about a cis man and a trans man who attempt to have a relationship, and it's fascinating to watch because you don't get to see that, right? But like you said, in the past, these stories have always been around. They just haven't been on the big screen, so it's great to get a chance to see those. I just watched an Irish film that was quite good, potentially for the fall. I won't give that away, but yeah, there's a lot of good stories like that. We actually just screened a story about an intersex sex worker for one of the films. That's potential for the fall as well. Not trying to advertise, but but we're seeing all these stories now, and like you said, internationally. We had a couple films last spring or last fall that were set in the Republic of Georgia, which is right next to Russia and has those crazy, terrible anti-LGBTQ laws now on their books. You start to see that, but people are still making art. They're still producing stories. They're still bringing that to the world, and that to me is honestly, in some ways, is hopeful, right? Like you can know that there are other people that are like me or similar enough, who at least think it in their thought process and want to get their stories out to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like with that, like, again, not to keep mentioning the importance of a film festival, but I think because the fact that like Image Out has, not just documentaries, not just, fictional narrative films and shorts as well, I think that you really are able to capture, again, like such a wide breadth of stories in that case. Michelle and Rick, do either of you like have a sense in that case of like, since you haven't, in the last couple of years, we've added a slightly different structure to the programming team. I think that has really, really helped in terms of like, again, providing a wider canvas. This is not a great question that I'm trying to kick to you, but maybe can you speak a little bit to that in terms of like how that works?
Sure. It's interesting because I think we came to this decision out of necessity, not necessarily with all that much intentionality behind it. I think that the job of programming a film festival is a big year-round commitment, and it's tough to do on a volunteer basis, right? In Image Out, really, that's the way that we operate for the most part. I would say that our new model kind of brings multiple people to the table working collectively, and it's absolutely been able to showcase and have more eyes on different types of stories and be able to scout things much more broadly.
Yeah. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we will have more about LGBTQ plus representation in film and the Image Out Spring Film Festival. So we'll see you right back.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from United Way of Greater Rochester and the Finger Lakes, serving the community for more than 100 years, dedicated to creating a future where everyone's basic needs are met so all can thrive. More at unitedwayrocflx.org.
This is Connections. I'm Matt DeTurk, sitting in for Evan Dawson. We are talking about LGBTQ plus representation in both arts and in culture and in our current climate. Joining me today are Michelle Thornton, board chair for Image Out, Rick Porlier, programming co-chair for Image Out, and co-directors Jennifer Teixeira and Guy Mossman of the documentary film Speak that will be at this year's Image Out Spring Film Festival. Before the break, we talked a little bit about festivals and kind of film festivals specifically, and about their kind of importance in a film's ecosystem is where I want to kind of move into now. Jen, can you speak a little bit about have film festivals impacted the journey of your filmmaking so far?
Absolutely. I mean, our industry right now is changing so rapidly, and so we're trying to kind of keep up. It's a tough market right now, but I would attribute a lot of my career growth to some of the festivals, Tribeca in particular. But it's really we work really closely with the festivals when it comes to outreach and impact and grassroots screenings and getting our films out. They're definitely a necessity for us, especially when we have social impact documentaries. I can remember a film that I made called P.S. Burn This Letter, Please. And, we played in, I want to say, 40 plus LGBTQ festivals around the world. And there was, festivals that I didn't even know existed in countries that I didn't know had that sort of, the film would have never reached those audience without those festivals. So we are, eternally grateful for those very specific festivals in particular.
Yeah, I think that film festivals give audiences a chance to see something they may not get to see because, unfortunately, as someone who works at an independent movie theater, we have not yet figured out how to bypass time and space to showcase every possible film.
That's right.
That we would like to. There's so many coming out that look so cool. So I particularly love in this case that a film festival like Image Out gets a chance to actually bring something to town and highlight it in that way. We talked a little bit about though also that sense of talking about films. Michelle, can you talk a little bit maybe about some of these other aspects? I know there's spilling the tea, sort of things like that.
Yeah, thanks. It's really important to me as I think about leading the festival is not I'm a movie buff like everybody, and I love to be in the theater and, enjoying the popcorn. But I know that stuff really sticks with me. And to have opportunities to kind of chat or connect or see what my friends thought about it, or just digest and process what I saw on screen in a different way, it's really important to me to weave in those opportunities throughout the festival. So we're doing it in two interesting ways. One is with dedicated events, like you mentioned. Spilling the tea is now something that we do halfway through every festival that we share. It's a way to get together without a movie, just have, in this case, tea, coffee, some snacks, and to kind of dish about what we've seen and talk a little bit about what's coming up still in the festival. But we're also experimenting with a new model this year where we've got kind of a mashup of a party and a film all happening in the same location. I'd love for Rick to talk a little bit about what we're doing on Friday night.
Yes, we are doing something different for us. We will be at the fabulous Artisan Works, and we will be having a dinner and a movie event. And we will be having dinner first and then the movie in the Vertical Heights part of the facility. But it's kind of fun to have that planned. And the film is an Italian film, Mascarpone 2. You need not have seen the first.
That was my question.
Not at all. It's a continuation. It's 3 years later, but it's Italian bakers. There's not a lot better than that food-wise, so the dinner and all of that is kind of planned in that direction around that. So it's kind of fun to come up with that, to pick up a film that we can, work with in that way to find that. So it's our Friday night. It's our first time we're doing it. We're pretty excited about it. So Artisan Work, then everybody in this community is a great partner in terms of sure, we'll do that. Okay, we don't know what that means, but we'll figure it out.
We'll give it a try. We'll make it work.
Yeah. So,
I think again, that sense of film festivals, in general, finding a balance between like what we're doing to like educate, but also what we're doing to entertain, I think is really, really important in that case. I, as someone who has also not tried to make a feature film in that case, Guy, I wanted to ask, did you feel in the making of Speak that there was a challenge trying to balance something that like both broadens people's horizons but also entertained them? Or was it just everyone was so dynamic in this that it was easy to make something entertaining?
That's a really good question, because it is hard to make a compelling film that takes place, that much of it takes place inside a classroom. But in spite of that, I mean, there were a couple of things that Jen and I did, I think, which will make it feel more like you're having a cinematic experience. And we wanted that as well. We wanted it to feel like you were in a world apart with these characters, because yes, they are so compelling, and we found them, we were so in love with them and still are. And we want audiences to be fully immersed. And so we thought about how we were going to shoot it, the sorts of lenses we would use, and, ways to kind of bring it to life in a film sort of way, so in a cinematic way. And I think that makes it feel more entertaining. The kids are great to hang with, but they're also, they like to talk, obviously. And so what we found is, audiences, they also want to see and they want to feel, and they don't want to be told what to think. So we spent a lot of time with them at home. We, unlike most competition films and documentaries, we probably spent 80% of our time at home with them and 20% in the competition.
Oh, wow.
And in the classrooms and on stage. And there was a reason for that, because we felt like, yes, because they're so interesting, but we have to spend some time with them. We can't just show up for a day and get what we need, get some B-roll, and cut it together in a fancy way. We really felt like we wanted to get to a real, an authentic place with them. And so the only way to do that is to spend time. And so we spent, and I think the film reflects this, a lot of time just hanging out with them, and then filming with them in situations and doing things in life that are not necessarily competition related, but are reflected in the speech that they're writing. And that was really important to us, that we were trying to capture elements of their life and how it reflected their heart story that's in their film. That's in their speech.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah. Please.
Yeah. No, that's pretty much it. And it hopefully we were able to bring their speech to life on screen in a way.
No, I think that's again, that element of being like, I feel like when we end up asking adults like, oh, what do you do? Like ends up being all about like, what is your job in that case? And not just about like who you are as a person, or, elements that like make you. We actually have a quick clip from Speak, in that case, that I would love to run.
Being in a room with hundreds of students over my speech debate career has allowed me to have an ear to listen. I don't always agree with everyone's speeches, but I can see their perspective and how they get there.
Maybe Jack Nicholson is right. We can't handle the truth. But there will be a point in each of our lives when we can't choose blissful ignorance.
At the end of the day, we're all human. And being able to see someone on a human level and how their experiences shaped how they view the world, I think that's super important.
I think that, again, as we keep saying, like, representation is important, and hearing how someone sees the world is important. Speaking of films that, again, like kind of help expand viewpoints, Michelle, I want to take a moment and talk about Heightened Scrutiny, which is a film that is screening at the Little.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Heightened Scrutiny is our second documentary in the festival. Like Speak also premiered at Sundance earlier this year. Heightened Scrutiny really is a film that I think gets at exactly what you were talking about in the beginning of the show around visibility. This is specifically around the trans community. It follows a case that the ACLU is arguing in front of the Supreme Court. One of the exciting things about this case is that it's the first ever out trans attorney to argue in front of the Supreme Court. His name is Chase Strangio. The case is U.S. v. Skermeti, and really it centers around fighting against a ban in Tennessee around gender-affirming care for trans youth. So this is, without a doubt, controversial. The case came up in December, and then they were still editing the film and were able to screen it a few weeks later at Sundance. So it's very timely, and the outcome of the case hasn't even been announced yet. It will be announced at the very beginning of May, just after Image Out ends.
Wow.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we are keeping a close eye on, and I think this is. The stories that are told, the families that are depicted in this film that have been impacted by this law in Tennessee, it gets really at the personal impacts of the children, the parents, their friends and family in a way that is really easy to resonate with, even if you don't personally know anyone who's trans, anyone who's seeking this kind of care. And so for us, this was a really important story to showcase this year at this time.
I don't want to make this like as a cis white man, don't want to make this a personal thing, but I think that this is again a situation where a lot of my initial exposure to trans narratives and trans stories came from Image Out as a young queer person, growing up in Rochester and attending the festival even before I was out. In that case, I feel like. Is so important in that case. I don't think every single film can possibly, represent every single person or tell every single story. But I feel like the more that you're able to watch and consume and in that case, digest, have conversations about, really, really helps in that case to broaden your own understanding and knowledge, again, of something that may be outside of your worldview.
Yeah, we wanted to create a lot of space for this one for people, both, longtime Image Out goers as well as allies that may come. This may be their first Image Out festival or the first time they've seen a movie that centers trans folks and their stories. So we are doing a panel discussion after the film that really brings this home to Rochester. So the discussion is moderated by Dr. Kai Lynch, who is a professor at the U of R in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology. But we also have some local advocates, local healthcare providers, representation from Trillium on the panel, as well as advocates for gender-affirming care more broadly, but all people that are working here in our community. And that really, I think, is important for folks to understand what their neighbors are grappling with, what patients that are trying to seek care in our healthcare facilities are running into. And even though New York's state laws are nothing like what's happening in Tennessee, there are still challenges and barriers that are happening here on the ground. And so I think we all owe it to the people in our community to be aware of what's happening. And I think the Supreme Court decision is going to be really impactful, not just for Tennessee, but even potentially here in New York as well.
How much of this does it go into dealing with is there any element of this that goes into dealing with parents and kids and different sensibilities between the two of them in that case? I
wouldn't say that that's actually a big focus of this. Really, what you see is parents that are very deeply affirming of their children, and in many cases, their biggest advocates, and are the ones that are really struggling with the fact that they're being told by their state government, in this case, that they can't give what they believe is the most appropriate care to their children.
Mm-hmm. Jen, I want to kick it back to you for a second to talk a little bit about parents in that case, since again, you're following a bunch of teenagers in the course of this film. Did you have any either hesitation or resistance from their parents about what their kids were saying?
No, not about what they were saying.
Oh, good.
I think, well, Actually, I take that back. I think there was a deep, teenagers will be teenagers. And so, I think there are some times in the film where it's like, well, do other parents come to watch you speak? And, and they're like, not really, So, parents come in some, but they don't come to all the events. They're doing events every weekend. I think there was a deep craving to understand, to see the speeches and understand the speeches. But for the most part, I think the parents were really, really impressed with what their kids were saying.
I think that's great. And I think that's, again, when we're talking about like support, I think in that case, and like wanting to like continue to push narratives further, I think in this country, I think that.
I'm sorry, but one thing I wanted to quickly add is what I loved about it was that the support wasn't unconditional. It wasn't just like, oh, you're brilliant, you're my kid, you're brilliant. It was like, oh, wow, I have so much to learn from you. And I think that that's a larger message of the film. What's so exciting, we have so much to learn from them, not just them from us.
Yeah, and I think that, again, comes down to, like, again, the importance of, like, education and, again, using, like, terminology, not being afraid to, like, speak up in that case, I think, again, pun intended. But I think that I think that's really important in that case for society to continue to grow and continue. So,
absolutely.
Can I just echo something there too? I mean,
please.
Two of our characters were writing very deeply personal speeches that, in some ways, challenged societal norms or what we typically think. And one was Sam, and one was Noah. Noah, in the case of assisted dying or assisted suicide, he had lost his mom during COVID, and in a tragic death. And Sam, who tells the story of his feeling left out and discriminated against at a young age at a church event that his father had organized. And I think that it was not easy for the parents to hear that, to hear some of these parts of the speech where they're and to Noah advocating at first at the beginning of the year for the right to take one's own life and to stop stigmatizing assisted dying and suicide more broadly, and then really thinking about it, being challenged by his father very gently over the course of the year and by his teachers to kind of think about why this may be happening and how to prevent it rather than saying, so he had an arc in the writing of his speech, but came about because I think those around him felt like they needed, were challenging him in a very gentle, kind way, and trying to help him think about sort of why one would get to that place in their life and how to help them before they get there. So his speech evolved in that way. Yeah.
In a very healthy way. In a very healthy way.
Yeah, and I think that again, that sense of like, pushing ourselves, but then also you mentioned like being gentle and having support. I think that's also an important facet of this is that it's we're learning, we're growing, but then also, again, coming back to like community, sometimes we just need to let go a little bit. Sometimes we need to have a little bit of release. Rick, are there any comedies in this year's festival?
Funny you should ask. Yeah, there are too. We are opening and closing with comedies, bookending the festival that way, in an attempt to remind people that it is okay to find some joy, to find some laughter in these current times. We're opening with Sisters on opening night and closing with Who Wants to Marry an Astronaut, a Spanish film, very delightful rom-com. And Sisters is the story, it's basically about family, chosen family and your biological family, and how those can conflict. So it's a really fun story. Yeah, we kind of did that on purpose to, like I say, to remind folks that it's okay to find him. Yeah, we enjoyed watching them. I've seen Astronaut twice actually, and the first time it was very funny. The second time it's very sweet. That's a definite. You could see that probably on the Hallmark Channel or whatever version of that is around nowadays, I suppose. But yeah, they're good stories, and we were looking for comedies, and we don't always find good comedies.
Right.
You know, we watch a lot of films, honestly, and from programming a little bit, you just see a lot, and these are good, and the audience is going to like them, and we're glad that we can share them and kind of lighten the mood a little bit.
Yeah. Do you find that I mean, I know you're early in the programming cycle this year, moving towards other festivals, or moving towards the fall festival, currently in the spring festival, but are you already finding that there's more submissions that are more downtrodden, or are you finding there's a little bits of joy to be found?
There are definite bits of joy to be found. There's not usually a ton of comedies. There are lighter-hearted films, certainly, and they're dramedies to some extent, sometimes more one than the other. But I feel like worldwide there are definitely those pockets. We are finding a lot, and we are trying to watch all of them as much as we can. So, like I say, the festival kind of presents itself at some point, and we're just there to help it along, as to what we show. But yeah, we're definitely keeping an eye out for lighter stuff. But yeah, I mean, like I say, it all comes together. It always comes together, and we're just in service of it at some points,
Michelle, in terms of in this case, since you're the board chair, in terms of keeping the organization how do you keep the team motivated in that case, between everything going on outside in the world, but then also wanting to present both ends of this?
Yeah, it's a great question that I think about a lot, actually. We have not just a large board, right, with different opinions that are all personally impacted by everything that's going on, but also then they each all have committees where they need to be doing that same motivation for their groups of people to come out. And really, I mean, there's nearly 100 people that ultimately come together in one form or fashion to contribute and make Image Out happen. So the idea of sort of taking responsibility for keeping all of them motivated and excited can be challenging. I think there's a couple of approaches that I take. One is to really give everybody the opportunity to be heard and creative and have their own outlet in this space. So if they have new ideas, things they want to try, play with, to support that and kind of give the opportunity for those new ideas to kind of come to life. I think that's one way that we can motivate folks. But I think in general, the Image Out crew feels to some degree that this spirit of volunteerism that they're able to get from connecting with Image Out is sort of an antidote to everything that else is happening in the world. While things are being taken away, while things are being defunded or removed, we can create and we can build something. And that is very empowering for people that are feeling, I think, down or could be depressed by what's happening in the external world. We can kind of really come in and combat that. And I think that that's very engaging and empowering.
Absolutely. So if people would like to come watch some of these films or experience some of the events, how can they find out more details?
Yes, we have a lovely website. It's imageout.org. There's all the information you'll need to get tickets, as Michelle mentioned, for the Next Gen series tickets, and just general information. There's a lot more on the website's been really tended to in the last few years, so it's really coming along well in that way. But yeah, there's all kinds of information there. You can always reach out to our office, to our managing director as well. There's a lot of, ways to figure that out. So,
and Michelle, one more time, what are the dates for this festival coming up?
Yeah, no, it's a 6-day festival. It kicks off this Thursday, April 24th, and goes through next Tuesday, the 29th. And we're going to be all over town. In addition to being on the website, you can buy tickets in person at any of the events as well.
That's awesome. Are there any other final thoughts, final films we didn't mention?
Not a film, but if I was going to kind of weave a thread through everything we've talked about today, whether it's the film Speak, the other documentaries, some of the events that we have, it's really about giving a platform and a voice to people that do not have that opportunity otherwise. And there is no sort of like more tangible way that we're doing that than testing out another new event, which is an open mic, which you don't normally think of, I think, in terms of a film festival per se. But Monday night, we will be doing that as just a way, not specifically to talk about films, but if people want to get up and share their poetry, their art, their music, their speech, we will have a stage for them to do that. And so we're really excited to kind of, put our money where our mouth is about that and let people really share their stories in a real, local, close way, and have some fun doing it too. That'll be at Skylark, and it should be a great night.
I love that Speak has become like a through line through this entire
Totally. Yeah. They inspired us. Those kids are, they're definitely powerful.
Well, I want to thank so much Michelle Thornton, board chair for Image Out, for being here today. Rick Porlier, programming co-chair for Image Out, and Jennifer Teixeira and Guy Mossman of the documentary film Speak, co-directors. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciated having you. Please, everybody, go check out the Image Out Spring Film Festival this year, and thanks for listening.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Monroe Community College, hosting Scholars Day with keynote speaker Dr. Clint Smith, journalist and author of How the Word is Passed, in a talk on racial justice. Moderators include Norma Holland, Wednesday, April 30th at MCC. Tickets at monroecc.edu.